Welcome back, everybody, to our amazing 50-hour online vigil event in solidarity with Julian Assange and with WikiLeaks. My name is Suzie Dawson. I am the president of the Internet Party of New Zealand. I'm a journalist and an activist and your host for today. I am so pleased to be here with the amazing editor, I want to call you editor, but maybe I'm getting this wrong. I'm sorry, executive producer of Community Public Radio, Don Debar. Welcome to the stream.
Well, you've got it right as far as executive producer, the amazing partner. Thank you so much.
I happen to know that you're amazing because my friend Mark Sloboda told me Don Debar is awesome and you want him on your vigil event. And I found it very interesting too because he also let me know that you're a very, very strong left-wing voice, whereas Mark is more on the conservative side, and you guys are best of friends. Yep. And I thought that was very indicative of the spirit of this entire event, which is that we can unite across the political spectrum in support of a worthy cause like freeing Julian Assange.
Yeah, which, Julian Assange's case is important to everyone, really. You have... however you want to characterize the great divide between the few with power and the rest of us, the 1% or the 10th of 1% or the bourgeoisie or whatever your frame of reference is, those people with power that don't want us talking to each other about what's going on and being done to us, if they can take a voice like Julian Assange's and silence him and make an example out of him in front of the rest of us, we don't have a chance.
Very much agree with you. Don, when did you first become aware of the work of WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, and what really attracted you to them?
Well, pretty much the first releases that came out about Iraq. What is that now? 8 years ago, maybe, or so. And then when it became possible to look at some of the files online, I started. We all wish we had time to look at everything that we'd like to and to study everything that we'd like to and to visit every place that we'd like to. But I spent a little time poking around in there. And it's really interesting to get a perspective on what journalism actually is by looking, go to wikileaks.org. Okay, this is the big, all the ruckus about WikiLeaks. This is the site. And when you go there, instead of there being blaring headlines, whether it's, Ellsberg's holding a bunch of files in 1970 or whatever, or a two-headed baby, in one of the Murdoch papers or everything in between, instead it's just, okay, well, here's this stuff you can look through, and here's that stuff you can look through. In other words, the news isn't this, sort of like... thing that's being ticked off, or these are the important events that took place yesterday. It's just, here's a whole bunch of stuff. It memorializes actions taken by public officials, by all these different events that have been documented. Here's evidence of people having a conversation about their intent before they committed these official acts, etc. And it makes you have to actually pay attention to the world with your own eyes, and then take documents like journalists are supposed to do and try to fit them onto, the thing that's happening, before us across this whole planet, and make sense out of all of it. So, okay, it's not like the New York Times, so it doesn't have a puzzle, to sit and work with on Sunday. As, if you look at someone, a widow my age in mid-60s, looking at Match.com website and saying you love to lounge around on Sundays and do the New York Times crossword puzzle. Well, if you want to poke around in WikiLeaks, some of the things that you can find there are more interesting than that. Like, for example, Dear Capricia, not sure if you were able to catch my interview with President Clinton last night on Piers Morgan tonight. Do you think calling Secretary Clinton the greatest Secretary of State of all time shows just a touch of my bias? President Clinton is incredible. All my best, Harvey Weinstein. There are all these gems buried in this massive trove of information that'll take all of us journalists 1,000 years maybe to, parse and process all of it. But this is the documentation of what's really going on in our world. And when that becomes available to the public, oh my God, it's the worst offense in history. Julian Assange has caught the attention of the power elite, or whatever term, again, you want to use for it, like no one else. And it's not because they thought, oh, wow, he looks really cute in those shorts or whatever. It's the kind of attention that most people don't want to attract, because it's usually followed by a lot of gunfire, bombs, all kinds of ugly stuff. And he's had sanctuary in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, thanks to President Correa, who took an awful lot of hell for that. If I remember, there were lots of threats made against him and others. Was it Evo Morales' plane, for example, that was dumped because they thought maybe he was, shuttling Assange around?
Snowden,
are enemies of the power elite, for sure. Not by anybody's intention. Yes, no, maybe. Who cares? They know these guys are dangerous to us because they help people understand what's going on around them, and we can't have that. So for the same reason that they've got their attention, they have to have our attention and our help.
I totally agree. So you just made a really key point. I love that no matter how many hours we do, no matter how many interviews we do, our next guest each time always has this unique perspective. And what I just heard from you is that WikiLeaks is delivering us information without editorializing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So they're not pushing a narrative. They're not pushing a prefab narrative on us. They're just saying, here's the information.
Yeah, it's not any narrative. I've been watching some unique developments. I mean, I'm sure we all have, and we all notice little different things. Something since Trump. I don't know if it's since he got elected, since he became president, or even since he spoke some of the unspeakable words and committed some of the crimes against nature by saying things like, "Oh my God, NATO, maybe we don't need it," and no more regime change, whatever. When he started getting like the carpet bombing treatment from the media, forget whether you like Trump or not, this is a fact. They started changing certain techniques that they had for reporting, where they throw heavy editorializing into the headlines, where before, let's say there was an ongoing dispute between the White House and the press over some event that happened. And so, like Nixon, Nixon claims no knowledge of plumbers in Watergate Hotel. Plumbers claim they know Nixon. It has morphed to Nixon lies that he doesn't know the plumbers. This is like a whole different level. Now, if you look at that and back out of it, it's sort of like fish not noticing that they're wet. Our whole introduction to journalism, to consumption of news, the part that we don't call editorializing is in fact editorializing. The very act of deciding where to point the camera on a busy street is an editorial decision. And so, yes, you can report that while you were pointing the camera at that car, it rear-ended that car and there's your news event. But is that the news and what happened at the corner of 42nd Street and 8th Avenue? What about the guy that got shot right across the street? What about the building that's being built over African Cemetery, et cetera, et cetera? The decision on what to report is itself an editorial decision, by definition. And so that's almost invisible to us in the whole process. Everybody has more or less, everybody meaning the corporate media and beyond. We're reporting on today in Syria this happened, in Paris that happened, in Tokyo that happened, etc. It's all kind of the same stories, and maybe you get a little different slant. Not so much anymore either, but kind of the same, like Patty Chayefsky did in Network, and I've seen in other films where you're on the steps of the courthouse, say, and there's a pan shot from reporter to reporter, and they're reading their piece into the camera on the steps of the courthouse, and they just sort of seamlessly pan from one to the other, and they're all telling the same story, even though they each individually wrote this. You have that going on. The news, quote unquote, has a similar process where there's a consensus that this stuff today, in fact, is the news, and all this other stuff. I don't know how many people died of starvation yesterday. How many people died of medical malpractice or denial of service for health insurance, or whatever. But there's a million different things that when they decide to take out a government in Central America, they report on those things every day. If it's even low-level government officials get parking tickets repeatedly if they're out of favor. You'll see somebody that keeps covering that, and they'll use it to whip up protests around that, and et cetera. Somebody decided that that's news. There are so many real, things of real import, like how many people have died of starvation in the last week in Yemen. How many people have been bombed over the last month to death by the United States? How many bombs have been sold in the last 2 months to replenish the ones that have been blown up this year? These are not news stories at all. And that is an editorial decision. And those editorial decisions are made by a very small set of people, because the concentration of ownership of the media is in the hands of a very small set of people. So the employees are also a small set. So that's our situation. Now you got Julian Assange says, oh, here's this great big file somebody just dropped off at our office. Here, I'm putting it on the table. Go through it. Oh, and there's that box over there that came in yesterday. That's journalism. That's the real stuff.
Wow. So the editorial role is to control the flow of information to the public.
Yeah, to define it.
That's the primary role. So when you remove that editorial layer, you are destabilizing the mechanisms of control and of censorship.
Yeah.
I can see you smiling at me, so I must be on the right track.
Imagine yourself, locked in an apartment, no windows. The only thing you have is the keyhole at the door. The thing that you have to look and see if it's the UPS guy or Jack the Ripper or whatever. That's your only view outside of to the outside world. And whoever's managing the imagery being projected in there, they have complete control over, pretty much your entire connection to the world. That is an analog to, what the mass media have had for 80 years, really, 100 years in the United States. Bernays, all those people back at the other end of this, this is what they were talking about, and what they were trying to do was figure out the techniques for wielding this weapon effectively. But they understood, A, it was a weapon, and B, it was in their hands. And so, C, how do we make these people do the things we want them to do, which is the point of all of this, or not do the things we don't want them to do using these tools? Because you've got a couple things that you want to induce in the mass of the population if you think you own them, which there were some folks apparently think they own the world and everybody in it, and they act that way, and they act to defend that position. One is you want them to not knock down your door and take their stuff back and string you up, for your trouble in the process, because that does happen repeatedly over the history of humanity. And, in some ways, on the one hand, poor folks in lots of places in the world may be poor, relatively speaking, to others in the society, but they eat or have TVs or cars or whatever things were termed luxuries. On the other hand, in the aggregate, probably the worst levels of intensive inequality in the history of humanity, that provokes a response. It's like gravity. It's like buoyancy. You push that beach ball down under the water, or the further down you push it, when you step out the way, that's how high up it's going to go. Well, if you oppress people, with the full power of what were the terms of art they were just barking out in the early 2000s? Total information management and, you know, all that claptrap that they had. Well, the more effective you are at that, when justice time comes, that's what you're going to get back. And so that just stopping that from happening is one very important task of the media for these people. The other is to allow them to pick whatever other pocket still has something left. You know, well, okay, a lot of them are in foreclosure now and or eviction, so the rents are high. You know, we can take their security deposits at will. We don't really have to do a lot of maintenance. Their situation's precarious, but they're living indoors, so as long as we don't push them out, they'll shut up. By the way, what's on TV tonight? Well, it's not the staff meeting of say the regulators, the Rent Control Guidelines Board, or whatever remedy there might be for housing abuse. There's not how to successfully sue your landlord in housing court. There's not how to defend a foreclosure lawsuit. There's not, by the way, examples of how some societies allocate housing without private ownership, or in any event without homelessness and inequality. Those things are kept off television and out of the newspapers. I mean, most people, for example, when they invaded Libya in 2011 and destroyed it, had no idea that Libyan people owned their own homes. Everybody that wanted to own their own home, and that was pretty much everybody, owned it. No mortgage, no real estate taxes, no rent, no maintenance charge, free. Housing is a human right. That's society. That's how they organize their housing. You walk around and talk about what was the likelihood? Was it really a popular uprising in Libya, or was it the United States, meddling, to use that term? Well, let's see. You go to a society, and if you know these things about them, people have free housing, they have free health care, including if they don't, and the hospitals say there were as good as a suburban hospital in New York. And if you needed something special, like you had to go to Sloan Kettering in New York, or, some hospital somewhere in the world, they send you and your family, and they pay for their hotel, and they pay your bills, and whatever else you need. Every person in the country gets that. Or if your kid gets admitted to Harvard, your kid goes to Harvard for free. It's from Libya. And, we don't want to send your kid to Harvard by himself. The cousin and grandma want to go live in Cambridge, we'll pick up the rent. This is the society that existed. Oh, yeah, by the way, we have all this oil revenue that comes in every month. Here's your share. You get a monthly check, $1,500, $2,000, $3,000 people got. Okay, now let's, again, knowing this stuff, have a discussion about, is this a popular uprising or something else created from the outside? Well, I think if you went around the world and said to people, take your existing situation and trade it for what I just described, if you had that, would you be out in the street demanding change of government and change of system? And of course, the answer is no. So if you know these facts about Libyan society, you know that the narrative saying that this is a popular uprising in Libya is a lie. And consequently, this information is kept from you. The soil, the pH of the soil reflects this across the board in terms of the information that we have about people around the world. The changes that have been taking place at a almost atomic level through things like Facebook, all the social media explosion over the last 15, 20 years, there are all kinds of cracks. People like you and I are speaking with each other. And I hung out with Mark in Moscow 2 weeks ago. I would have never met him. All these different things. But you can see the mad scramble to manage that that's going on. They have congressional hearings all the time now on how to make this disappear from the social media and instead have this model prevail, just like the model that it was replacing. So it's the information struggle, information freedom, the information revolution, central to really, I think, to the survival of humanity, because the direction that the elite wants to take us, absent some ability on our end to control events, it's not good. I mean, they're willing to they have the military up against the borders of Russia and China. The last 4 years, they've been drilling actively with, weapons hot, with defensive missile systems hot, and all of this. And the purpose of it is clearly to say, you guys are going to do what we're telling you, or we're coming in. And just real quick, because this is probably the longest sentence you've ever heard in your life, but when you're one of the countries like North Korea, Russia, China, whatever, where the U.S. and NATO have their war games, quote unquote, from your side, you can't tell till they get to the border whether this is a war game or an invasion. They light everything up, they put it up in the air, and they come a-running, and they come to your border. If they stop and turn around and go home, it's a war game. Now, your response can't be, let's just wait. If they come across the border, we'll set up the alarm, we'll call everybody into base, we'll send them out. You have to be prepared to meet them at the border. And so this kind of thing has been going on for 4 years, like right at the Russian border, with Russia and China in the South China Sea.
So the agenda is global domination, right?
Say again?
So the agenda is global domination.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
This is the
objective is, these people we own everything. It's hegemony to the nth degree. When they look at Russia basically that's my oil. Those people there are the ones that are supposed to carry it from the oil well out to my ship, so I can fly it over here, sail it over here to my bank. That's how it works. And it's my planet. That's how they see it. And anybody that says, well, no, actually it's ours, well, you can see what happened. Saddam Hussein, look around the world.
Yeah, so to achieve that global domination, they need to have control over the flow of information. Yep. Because it is the information warfare that that empowers them to engage in the actual warfare.
Yep.
Correct?
Well, if you think about it in warfare terms, this actually it's the communications on the battlefield communications. You got your army on this side, my army on that side. I'm going to talk to my troops. They're going to talk to me. They see the other guys are coming. I say, okay, fine, get the archers out, or whatever. You put up the orange flag or whatever they used to do 500 years ago. It's the same. It's a way of engaging reality generally. You want to explore the solar system. You send out cameras to look around, to test things. What's that orange light mean after we burned, this particular carbon substance near it? Oh, it must mean that there's some bauxite in this thing. I mean, you go out and you research everything before you engage it. Well, these guys are engaged in the project of dominating our species and our planet. And it's no accident that they're pretty much there, okay? After thousands of years, that's just been a larger and larger pile of power that's descended into the hands of a smaller and smaller set of people. Maybe it's an accident, whatever, it's irrelevant. It's something we have to engage, and in order to do it, we have to know the facts on the ground and be able to speak with each other freely about what to do about it. And WikiLeaks is there's no other tool exactly like it. It's an extremely important one, maybe the most important one to come along in the last 20 years, and maybe longer. And for that, you're seeing people be prosecuted. I mentioned earlier when you asked me, how did I first hear about it? And of course, it was the release in Iraq that was with then Bradley Manning, but Chelsea Manning. That he ended up, Chelsea ended up in prison. Well, I don't know, how long was it? 5, 6 years, 7 years, on a slab somewhere with no clothes half the time and incommunicado. And, for what? For showing the world a little piece of what the United States had been up to. So You know.
So if the information control is what enables the global domination, then WikiLeaks is the spanner in the works that's messing up the information control, right? Because they are not adhering to the editorial agenda.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Look, the editorial agenda is I'm going to talk to my people and tell them what's going on, and if you get in the way, woe be unto you. That's basically it. So, we had stand-up guy, President Correa, stand-up people of Ecuador providing shelter. Then we get Lenin Moreno gets elected president as a popular politician because he promised more of the same. He runs in Correa's party, on Correa's platform, with the full embrace of Correa, gets in and he betrays everyone on every count. He's a puppet of the United States. He's made it clear. And now, of course, they're making noise about getting Assange, out of there. We can't allow that to happen. And some of the things that need to be done, frankly, should be somewhat forward-based. Protests outside of all the Ecuadorian embassies around the world. And for people in Ecuador, that aren't happy about being betrayed by their president, have them recalled. Take a look at what these people are doing in the United States to try to drive Trump out of office. Study it closely. Apply your own law, because you don't want to do anything outside of the law, and get Lenny Moreno the hell out of there and put somebody in that'll do, because, for example, one of the things Correa did, aside from providing refuge for Julian Assange, was to kick the U.S. military out of Ecuador. And when the U.S. decided to demand a right to put the military back in, President Correa said, sure, no problem. You can put as many bases as you like in our country, as long as for each one, I can put an Ecuadorian military base in Florida. And so, I don't know, if they want to drive Julian out of the embassy there, there must be some kind of in-kind exchange that we can make somewhere on this planet that it'd be just as painful for the bad guys as they're trying to make it for a truth teller like Julian, and for the rest of us to depend on it.
Can you give me an example? Because that's an extremely intriguing prospect.
I don't know. It's something that people need to think on collectively, and I don't know. I'm not certainly advocating anything illegal, but there are certainly some actions that might be considered illegal by this group and not by that group, because prosecuting Julian Assange is actually illegal, but the court systems will be the agents of that if they get their hands on him. There is a people's justice too. There are, in my end, for example, Julian is letting us peek behind the scenes in places where there's information that's been hidden. If you work somewhere and there's sensitive materials there or something, maybe the best thing to do would be not surreptitiously, but publicly, have a press conference in the file room at the Pentagon, for example. Come on in, guys. Here's the budget. You want to see it? This kind of stuff. Every time
the budget is actually what they're most concerned about. Is you hit them where it hurts, and that's in the money. Having read through the Snowden files, that is one of the primary considerations and concerns of the NSA and their documentation, is anything that could impact their funding. And they very tightly control the flow of information to the congressional overseers through what they call the NSA liaison office, because they're desperately scared that someone in the NSA might give the congressional overseers something that might negatively impact upon their budget.
Right. Well, I saw when I was, researching to come on, and I've been following this anyway because I've been paying attention to what the people you have on have been saying. But I went through notes like, summarizing, and I remember seeing Cynthia McKinney's name there. So I know you spoke with her. Well, one of the things that she did when she was in Congress was say, sorry, guys, I was going through the books yesterday, and I can't seem to find this $1 trillion. Anybody there, Mr. Rumsfeld, you got any idea where it went? This kind of stuff. That is exactly what they don't want us to talk about. There are lots of people, we have an interesting political condition in the United States right now, that a lot of people are trying to paint it as being really dark and sinister and hopeless. And in fact, I don't see it that way. There's certainly some ugly things that are visible, but they've always been there. It's just some of them are more visible now. One of the things that I think is extremely hopeful is that we're seeing a break between institutional power on the one hand and just about everything else on the other, including, in some ways, the president and some other public officials. You look at the CIA as one place, and the Pentagon. We saw, even before the election of 2016, the phenomenon of CIA-backed rebels, quote unquote, jihadis in Syria, live fire exchanges with Pentagon-backed, soldiers, whatever, in Syria. In other words, the Pentagon and the CIA were shooting at each other on the ground, on the battlefield in Syria. There is some sort of internal struggle going on in both the power elite and then the apparatus of it. People are referring to as the deep state or whatever, but the institutional power as opposed to the actual power, like the apparatus part of it, seriously conflicted. And there are people who see in what's been happening in the United States as an attempt to, like a slow-moving coup d'etat, to remove Trump by any means necessary. There's some people that want to do it over the fact that he's, racist, misogynist, whatever, all valid reasons for wanting to get somebody out of office. If first of all, if that's the case, and secondly, and this is the part for me, if that makes them unique among the cast of characters that you're engaging. It's one thing to remove somebody because they're racist, misogynist, whatever, and no one else is. It's another to remove them for that and replace them with someone exactly the same on those scores, but you don't talk about it anymore. For the United States, there's an awful lot of history that hasn't been, milled through a Truth and Reconciliation Committee yet, for people to be, too sanctimonious. But I'm getting to the point, which is that you have a lot of foot soldiers in places like the CIA, the FBI, law enforcement in general, where these are people that came to it to the extent that you can do this honestly. This is something that service my country needs. I'm going to try to help protect my country from spies from abroad and blah, blah, blah. And they go in, and you end up with people that are political on the top, or the people that are actually, they know what the real purpose of the institution is, and they're trying to put you to work for it. There's a break with some of those folks right now, and there's been some really big revelations, and particularly some of the ones that came through WikiLeaks, where people working at FBI, CIA, NSA find out that the work that they were doing is actually being used for some really nefarious purposes. Gee, I did gather this information, but I had no idea we were bugging everybody's phone, this kind of stuff. And so I'd like to encourage people across the board that are, and this is what Ray McGovern and others like him, are doing, encourage them to say, look, you have special access to the evidence of the massive wrongdoing that's going on. And the best disinfectant for that is, to share it, just open the windows and show it to us, let it shine a light on it. In other words, whistleblow. So I think the best response to them trying to suppress Julian Assange and others, Snowden, whoever else, is for people to become whistleblowers. Let there be, let 1,000 flowers bloom. Show them if they try to suffocate one, 10 stand up.
That's very much what this movement is about, is trying to empower people to actively support Julian and WikiLeaks. I'm not sure if you're across the whole story of what we've been doing with this organizing platform, but we have launched
You do it. Please do. Give us a, yeah.
Sure. So basically, we started out with these vigils and just each month growing the vigils, bringing more and more voices on. But we soon realized that we needed to give our audience a way to engage that uses their own creative talents, because not everybody's a public speaker, not everybody can get on and participate in these streams. But everybody can do something, whether it's holding a bake sale and donating the funds to WikiLeaks, or whether it's creating video or music or graphic content, or reading, writing, researching, translating, you name it. Everyone has some skill, some area, some talent, some area of expertise. So we created this collaborative platform about 10 days ago, 10, 12 days ago, to bring everybody together who wanted to participate in taking action in whatever form to free Julian, to help Julian. And we expected 500 people, we hoped for 1,000 people, and we got 2,604 days.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it's just absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of very positive feedback about what we're doing, but I still think we're at the beginning. I think we can push to 10,000 to 20,000 people. And so what we've done is we've got everybody volunteering for these teams, and the teams are all based on the different talents or areas of expertise that the volunteers have. And in those teams, they're suggesting their own projects, developing their own projects, working together with each other in these projects. And we've just created this phenomenal amount of movement, real movement towards where we want to go collectively. We've done it with no funds. We didn't even need money, because people are volunteering their time and volunteering their ideas and their resources. And it's starting to turn into something really, really cool and really amazing. And it's a bit of a bright light on the horizon for us to think that we don't have to just be passive viewers watching history unfold, but that we can actually be a part of influencing the course of events.
That's right. We're actors instead of audience. That's right. That's perfect. It's been, 50 years maybe since people my age were in the street for civil rights and to end the war in Vietnam, and then for everything that's happened since. And a lot of times you see a lot of people march, like February 15th, 2003, before the Iraq War, when the spontaneous, they were organized, but there was a massive stand-up of people against the war in Iraq across the world, millions, maybe the largest global protest in human history, I think people called it at the time. And we were shocked at what happened going into New York. I was expecting to see maybe 5,000, 10,000 people, or a few 100,000, and it had been a blizzard like that night before. There was snow up to our waists and stuff, and there were hundreds of thousands of people out. So we figured, seeing that, this war, forget it. They're gonna put this back on the shelf, and that's gonna be that. And within a month, even though we did another one, they started the war. And the people continued to protest, and then they stopped doing that when Obama got elected. But the problem was then clear that you got to go from somewhere from protesting, which is really just kind of organizing people in a head count, like, oh, okay, we all either are against this or want this to happen or whatever, and instead put people to work on it in a way that's going to actualize, like, in other words, make it happen. That's the hard part. And this is exactly the kind of thing that needs to be done. It's very timely. It's nice that people are, going out in the streets and putting on pink hats and, all this other stuff. Where each of these things leads is unclear. And how you get from where we are to wherever that is also unclear. What you're doing is quite different. You articulate up front, this is the problem. You know, we have to rescue Julian, basically. We have to protect him. We have to carve out space for people to do that. How are we going to do it? Well, we're all going to sit down and start working on it. And so here's what I'm going to do. Here's what you're going to do. Here's where we all meet. We're going to sit and do this regularly. We're going to pull in journalists to talk about journalism. We're going to have people do artwork to do artwork. We're going to organize people to do this, that, and the other thing. It's like getting from from theory to practice, basically. Theory's great with no practice. Theory's theory. Practice is great with no theory. You can bump into a telephone pole and bruise your skull and stuff and end up going nowhere. Theory and practice joined, you accomplish great things, and that's what you're doing. And I'm glad that Mark asked me to participate, and I'm glad that this is going on.
Thank you. From my perspective, when you see, sometimes it takes you seeing other people doing something to realize that you yourself can do it. Because this is how I became an activist, was by seeing the Occupy movement in 2011, seeing all of these people coming together. And that was when I realized, hey, I'm not the only one who's been thinking these things. And actually other people think like me. And actually they, not only do they think like me, but they want to do something about it. And I need to go there and join them so that I can help them to do something about it. And I think that explains, why we got 2,600 people when we thought maybe we'd be lucky to get 500. And the prevailing sentiment that I keep hearing from people is, we were waiting for something like this. Like so many people have said, I was just waiting for something like this to happen. I was just waiting for it. And now it's here. I can't not be involved. I must be involved. So that's like a really, really cool thing to see, is that we are empowering other people to feel that they can translate their thoughts and their feelings into action through a movement like this.
Now, so the thing that's going to hold it together is that's got to be where the focus is. Okay, here we are. We could turn 2,600 into 26,000 into 26 million. Not impossible at all. I won't say easily done, but reachable and doable. With if you've already got 2,600 people. If they put in a few hours a week, you can be in the millions anyway in a couple of weeks. So, I mean, if you look around, I do this from time to time, looking at Facebook, for example, my Facebook friends, quote unquote. A lot of them have a lot of friends. And if you look at the abouts in them, you'll see that a lot of them are not the people they grew up with in the next town or whatever. They're people that, there's some affinity that is the bond there. Now, with mine, most of the people that are my friends, the affinity is, politics. The affinity is, trying to change the world to make it a peaceful place and prosperous place and a place where justice prevails. In other words, where everybody can wake up and have a decent day, without getting blown up or starving or suffering some horrible exploitation. You're going to look at those 2,600 people and see an awful lot of commonalities on those, in those areas. And so it's just a matter of, calling them out to say, okay, look side to side at the people that are around you. How many can you reach? And having a couple people maybe work together a tool block, like a little workbook for, okay, here's the kit you email to your friends. It's got the, hi, this is Julian Assange's bio. This is what we do every Saturday and Sunday. Send this link to 10 of your friends. Some real short, sweet, simple thing for people to do and disseminate the hell out of it. You're going to come back in this room and say, damn, who are all these people? And that's the way it'll get done. It will get done, too. I mean, it's already rolling.
Hearing you say this is making me realize how much we need you to be a part of this, because with 2,600 people, we've had people do user guides for how to use the platform from the technology side of it. But what you just said is a brilliant example of a tangible step that we could take today to better educate people about how they can participate and how they can advance the movement.
What I learned,
thank you for that.
What I learned doing community organizing, locally. I live in Ossining, New York, and like sort of northern Westchester. The cheap and simple are the most effective tools. we would, when we want to try to get 1,000 people to go to a community meeting about the housing project in Ossining, would do something that would provoke one of the local newspapers, like the weeklies or whatever, to cover it on the front page, whatever, burn the building in effigy, like a little model of it, whatever it took to do that. So they would print the newspaper with our thing on the front page, and then, look, run an extra 5,000 copies, we'll buy them. Get on the train station, just hand them out to people as they come by. And
wow,
without doing anything else, where there's normally 10 people at a planning board meeting, there's 1,100. You can do those kinds of things with Facebook pretty easily. You just give people like the little, here's the little thing that you copy and paste, basically. And on top of it, share widely. And on the bottom, you click here and it kind of auto shares, however you can, whatever kind of app you can put together. The simple and cheap works.
That's a really important message as well, about making sure that you get the maximum dissemination for whatever content you are able to get out into the mainstream.
Yep.
Very important message.
And the thing that you're asking people to do has to also be easy. Easy to apprehend, easy to accomplish, so, damn, I really want to do this. I promised my kid I would take him bowling, or, whatever it is, something that's not going to be a load on the rest of my life. It's something I can get done like this. So it's easy to understand. It's easy to do. And it's easy to see in context the effect. Like, you know what? I did that. It took me 10 minutes. I think those 50 people over there are there because I invited them.
Yeah.
When you
the immediate impact.
After that, you'll be amazed.
Don, I am so happy to have made your acquaintance, and I'm so grateful now to Mark for having made that happen.
Yeah.
I will definitely be in touch, because I am not an experienced community organizer. I have only 7 years experience in working for mass movements, and usually on the media side of it, not so much on the organizing side. So even though I find myself now being the organizer for Unity for J, I have so much to learn from people like yourself who have decades of experience at that. So I would really appreciate it if you would help to take me under your wing a little bit and to share some of your knowledge with me so that we can do a better job of this.
I'm in awe, Suzie, first of all, of what you've got done already. And I'll just remind you that, experienced or not experienced simply means, it's a shorthand for I'm old and you're not. You'll be old at some point too, and when you are, you'll be amazed at how much experience you've suddenly accumulated. So just keep doing what you're doing. The experience comes with, with the piling up the receipts on the table, basically. And try the main thing is that the things that you're working on, the things that we're working on, are in the interests of the vast majority of humanity. And so, and most people know it. If it's presented simply in a way that they can relate to their everyday experience, the reason that you don't believe any of the people on TV is because they are lying. Okay, and they lied about this, they lied about that, they lied about that. This is something you can do about it to help change it. Reach 10 friends that you talk with that all agree that they like, on TV all the time, and ask them to do this. And then, let us know what you did. Something simple like that. And it'll just clone itself.
That is so cool. It's such an awesome discussion. Thank you so much for being here. And like I said, I will be knocking on your door sometime soon.
You got it. I'm around. Thank you so much, Suzie. And thank you to everybody with you that's helping.